Hello friends, we will begin with the RC section. This session is basically an intro to reading comprehension. I'll take you through the historical data as far as RCs and CAT goes. We'll look at the key elements that are required to solve the RCs and also what are the major problems that students face when reading comprehension is concerned. To begin with, if you look at the word reading comprehension, there is a read and there is a comprehend. Is there a difference between reading and comprehension? What I basically want to say is, when I read a particular text, is it necessary that I also comprehend it? May not happen, isn't it? A lot of people can read a lot of things. How many of us actually comprehend what we learn? What is important? Is it only reading important, or is comprehending the text also equally important? Comprehending is also equally important. Rather, it is more important than just being able to read. To be more clear and simplistic, reading is a visual process. It is merely looking at those images, getting an idea about these images. These images have to be converted into meanings, have to be converted into some sense, which is what comprehension is. So comprehension is more of a cognitive process, it's more about being able to understand. So what is being evaluated in reading comprehension? Given a data, can you understand that data? Now, how can someone evaluate whether you have understood the data or no? One way of that could be, I ask you to write a summary. I could ask you to write a précis. I could ask you to write a main idea. Or if I want to keep it a more of a multiple choice question type, I basically have to ask you questions. So what does CAT do in reading comprehension to be able to figure out, can you comprehend the data given to you? Gives you a passage which is followed by a few questions, which is what the pattern of reading comprehension in CAT is. Now, to reiterate my point, can I read anything? Absolutely. For example, if you look at this passage or this paragraph given to you, would you be able to read it? I'm sure you can. If you can read English, you would be able to read this also, because this is also in the same script that the English language follows, which is basically Roman script. So any person who can read the Roman script, would he be able to read French? Yes. German? Yes. But would he understand French? Might not be. Would he understand German? Might not be. So there is a clear-cut difference between reading and comprehension. A person who knows Spanish will be able to understand this, might not be able to will be able to understand this, but a person who does not know Spanish will not be able to understand. So reading and comprehension are two distinctive processes. What CAT is evaluating is basically comprehension skills and not simply the reading skills. Now, to look at the weightage given to RC in CAT, let's go back to some data. Let's look at the last 2 years rather than looking at a lot of data, 2013 and 2014. 2013 CAT, there were two sections in CAT, section 1 and section 2. Section 1 was Quant and DI, section 2 was English and LR. I am assuming that you know that in 2013 CAT happened over a period of 20 to 22 days. Each day had 2 slots, and so in all there were 40 slots in the paper. Now each slot had a different paper pattern. Not just that, in the same slot itself people had a different paper pattern. Now though the paper pattern changed, the overall structure of the paper did not change, which means there were 30 questions in section 1, there were 30 questions in section 2. Now section 2 across the slots had 21 questions on English and had 9 questions on LR. Now of these 21 questions, around 9 to 10 questions were RC and the remaining questions were verbal ability and verbal reasoning. So if you look at it, 50% of the verbal section was RC in 2013, and that's the trend even in the previous years. Any year that you take, the verbal section in CAT has always been RC centric, which means 50% weightage in the verbal in CAT is given to RC. In fact, there was a time when CAT used to have 4 sections and RC used to be one entire section. Then they decided to merge the two and verbal RC came into one section, and then also the weightage given to RCs in CAT in the verbal section has always been 50%. You look at this year's CAT 2014 had 50 questions, out of which 34 in the second section were verbal and the rest were LR. Now out of these 34 questions, 16 questions were RC with 4 passages there, which again is a point. 50% weightage in CAT is given to the reading comprehension section. Now what is the point of giving you this data? 2 things. I'm trying to sell the importance of RCs in CAT. You cannot think of cracking the verbal section unless and until you are sure you can at least solve one passage. Second, among the various question types in CAT, RC probably is the only constant element. So I know come what happens, whatever be the paper pattern, whatever be the structure of the paper, RCs will always be an integral part of CAT. So therefore that particular reason, for other these two reasons, you will have to work on RCs. Am I saying you have to solve all the passages given to you? Absolutely not. I'm saying at least solve one or two. Now of the passages given to you, how many passages you need to solve, how much time can you spend on these passages, etc., is what this slide will help you understand. But before we get into the slide on time allocation, some elements or some pointers which are very critical to solve RC. We call them the critical elements in reading comprehension. One, speed reading. You have to be able to read the passage in a particular time. How much is this time? Totally depends upon what is the paper pattern that year, what is the time allocation, etc. We'll take CAT 14 as an example to prove how much time does a person get for reading comprehension. So one, speed reading, you should be able to read and comprehend the passage quickly. Second, you should be able to comprehend whatever data is given to you, because if you are not able to comprehend the passage, you will not be able to solve the questions following it. And third, you should be able to get the questions right. So three elements: one, read them quickly; second, being able to comprehend; and third would be questions. Now when someone is solving a passage, what are the elements that are important? He has to read and comprehend the passage and solve the questions following it. Now which reading and comprehension will happen together? Questions is the second process. Can I give equal time for both of them? Or rather, which will take more time? Would they take equal time, or one part takes more time than the other? Generally one will take more time than the other. In that case, where would I give more time? Should I give more time to reading, or should I give more time to the comprehension element? Generally people say reading takes more time. But if you look at it, when I'm solving my questions, I always will have to reread the passage also. It's a very rare case that one time reading helps me solve all the questions. So what happens is that while solving questions, the rereading time of a passage is also included in it. Therefore solving questions takes more time than the reading element. And if you notice, you go back to the history of CAT, look at the various paper patterns and the time allocation, you will come across an equation where generally the maximum time that you get to read and comprehend a passage in CAT does not go beyond 5 to 6 minutes. Now keeping this aim in mind, keeping this thing in mind, you have to start preparing for reading comprehension. Now when I am preparing for reading comprehension, what are the critical elements that come my way? There are three elements that are critical. One, as I said, speed reading. Second, we spoke about the comprehension element, and third, we spoke about the questions. Speed reading is connected to time allocation, and we'll take up speed reading once again when we look at questions to solve. Second element is comprehension. Now when we talk about problems in reading comprehension, these problems are generally problems with comprehending the passage. So what are the problems that people do come across when they comprehend the passage? One basic element: people don't read. Since you are not used to reading, it gets difficult for you to even comprehend or even sit down in one place and read data. That's one. Second, the subject not known to you. You are not aware of that subject. The subject acquaintance is not there, a reason why comprehension becomes a problem. And this is one of the major factors which makes passages difficult to read. That's one. Second, the style of the author. In short, the way the author has presented data. For example, if you look at two newspapers, let's take a newspaper like Times of India and a newspaper like the Hindu. Times of India is easier to read than the Hindu is because of the style of that. Times of India assumes that a person does not like reading, so it has to make the data very easily available to the reader. The Hindu assumes a person likes reading and gives a content intensive paper. Therefore, the two of them become easier or difficult to read is because the way the information has been present, which is basically the style element. And third element is the language element. Now in language, what is it that makes passages difficult to read? Most of the students give answers in terms of the words used. But if you notice, words is not so much of an issue, because most of the times you can guess the meaning of the word from the usage. But yes, words not known to you can reduce your speed. Would they impact your comprehension? May not be so much unless there is a question on it. But more than the words, the language structure, the way the sentences have been constructed, some of them are convoluted, twisted, have implied meanings. These make a passage difficult to comprehend than simply your words. Which essentially means the point that we are trying to make here is that these are the major factors which make passage reading difficult or passage comprehension difficult for a student. So if you work on these elements, If you work on these factors, to a large extent the comprehension element will happen. Now the sessions following this will now start focusing on each of them and what can be done to overcome these problems. Now the entire RC preparation is basically divided into two areas. One, efforts taken to improve your reading and comprehension, and second, efforts taken to solve the questions. What we are going to do is we'll focus more on the RNC at the initial stage, because unless this happens the questions will not happen, and then we'll move on to the questions.